The Oklahoma Congressional Delegation, in terms of its size, is on the small side, 7 members, 2 senators, 5 representatives. But in terms of its influence, it's not small at all. In fact, it carries significant weight, especially now with a Republican in the White House. Well, I was recently able to get all 7 members of the delegation to sit down for a group discussion to focus on, to some extent, current topics, but more on what makes this delegation unique, both individually and as a group. Well, for the first time since I've been here in Washington, D.C., I've got the entire congressional delegation here in one room at one table, and we're going to talk about the Oklahoma delegation and what makes it special. So I want to start by going around to each one of you and have you talk about your mission. You know, what is your guiding principle as you approach your jobs? And if appropriate, how do your Oklahoma roots influence that mission, that guiding principle? Let's start with the congressman from the 1st District and come around.
Yeah, so I got in politics when I first moved to Oklahoma. I got invested in from a guy named Tom Coburn as he was coming out of the House. And so met him, understood a little bit about it, stepped away, understood about the fiscal responsibility of Congress when he ran for Senate, flew him all over the state, sort of led it that way, and then stepped away again for about 10 years and then ran in 2017 for the 2018 race. And my narrative was on the campaign trail that I wanted to run to get government out of the way so businesses could create jobs and put Americans to work. And I still do that every single day, and I sleep well because that's my mantra every single day with every single bill.
Congressman Brecheen.
Yeah, I hope Carolyn Coburn watches this because, like what Kevin Hern just said, relative to people in your life, I think it's a general statement. You don't go any further than you've been yourself. Absent the times you have somebody that can mentor and show you something you on your own effort wouldn't see. I had the great opportunity to work for him for 6 years, and that really shaped my ideology. And so that led to strong conviction after I'd walked away from politics for a number of years. Prayerfully felt led to run, really convicted over where we're at financially. And so that absolutely ties into Oklahoma.
Senator Mullin.
I don't really have a Coburn story. They weren't pleasant. So, my guiding principle has always been a God, family, and then you. And I think if your priorities right, you can do your job right. For me, being centered and in my belief in the Lord, which I mess up. I mean, James Lankford's, he's embodies, the Christian faith. I mean that sincerely. And I think all of us try to follow that. But for me, if I can be centered with the Lord and my family's good, then I'm good, and my mind's clear, and I'm able to do things. And so, one of the things that we always say is do the right thing the first time. Politics wasn't anything I ever thought I would ever do, and I'm probably the last person in this room that ever thought I'd be in politics. But I'm blessed to be here, and I don't take it for granted.
Senator Lankford, what's the guiding principle for you?
Yeah, well, my faith is a core part of who I am. It provides that foundational piece for me to be able to come back on. You go through a lot of storms and you go through a lot of attacks, but you go back and you read scripture and you go, yeah, we're not the first ones to be able to go through it. So it actually resets your heart to be able to say, get back to the battlefield, get back to work on it. We have the privilege of representing 4 million really remarkable people with a lot of different opinions. And it's funny, we hear all the time, everybody at Oklahoma, they're all conservative. And we smile and go, no, come to our state. There are a lot of conservatives in our state, but there's a wide variety of opinions. And there's a lot of people that are there. There's small business, large business, farmers and ranchers, and folks that are homeschooling, folks that do private school and public school. You've got all these different varieties of folks that are here. We have the privilege of getting a chance to be able to represent all of those voices here and to say, if that person back home were sitting here, seeing the things that we're seeing, reading the things that we're reading, going through the background information, this is how we think they would vote. Because at the core, we still are pretty much common sense values, Oklahomans, middle America. And for us, we get the privilege of getting a chance to be able to carry that message here.
Congressman Bice.
Well, I think similar to Senator Mullin, being in politics was never part of my life plan either. I was encouraged to consider running for the state Senate and did so back in 2014, and then was encouraged to consider running for Congress in 2020. And the campaign slogan I used at the time was results, not rhetoric. And I think that really embodies who I am. I try to find results. And whether it was putting 2 state questions on 2 back-to-back ballots when I was in the state Senate, or coming here and finding a pathway to put together a paid family leave initiative. I'm trying to find ways that, better Oklahoma. I'm a born and raised Oklahoma girl. I've raised 2 daughters in our great state, and I want them to be proud of where they're from and want to be part of Oklahoma in the future. And so for me, whatever I can do to make our state the best place to live and work and raise a family is what I'm trying to do.
We have some real leaders in our delegation. So I want to talk about leadership a little bit, and we'll go around the other way this time. But specifically the ways that you attempt to lead here, whether it's in terms of pushing specific legislation, working to develop consensus, doing the hard work behind the scenes. How are you being a leader in this Congress?
Well, I have taken on some early leadership roles. I was really honored to be elected the freshman class president, Republican freshman class president in 2021. I was actually the first female ever to hold that role. And my job in that was to try to educate my colleagues, my classmates, as well as provide a pathway for them to express their concerns or frustrations. Moving into last Congress, I made the decision to be part of the Main Street Caucus and ran for vice chair of Main Street. That is a group of pro-business, common sense, governing members of the Republican Conference that are trying to do what they think is best for their constituency as it relates to business. So I ran and was elected to that. And for me, it's finding, I think, a way to be and have an impact within the conference and be able to speak a voice that maybe others don't have.
Senator Lankford.
Yeah, so leadership is really not a title. And it's interesting how many times I'll hear someone talk about they're a leader because they have a certain title. That's not leadership. In fact, at its most simple level, leadership is just seeing a problem, asking someone to help you solve it, and then you go solve it together. The lacking piece of what happens here is we talk a lot in Congress about the problems, but not how to be able to solve it. And so the challenge for all of us is when we see a problem, developing a solution, building the coalition big enough to actually move it to a set of a commitment, quite frankly, to be able to actually solve that is a challenge. But that's a challenge at home that people have with local schools. They engage with their neighborhood and their community. If you see a problem, find somebody to help you solve it. And then the 2 or 3 or 4 of you, however many it takes, up here it takes 218 on one side of the building and 60 on the other side of the building to be able to move anything. So for me, being a leader means listening to other people, trying to be able to earn the respect of other folks, and then trying to move a set of ideas to say, can we agree this is a problem? Then let's see if we can figure out how to be able to solve it and then to be able to move it. And that is hard to do in a body with 535 really solid egos in this place. But we've got to be able to agree on a problem and then agree on how to be able to solve it and move it.
Senator Mullin, you've emerged as quite a leader in this Congress under this administration. Talk about your leadership role.
Once again, I have no title, and I think James said it right. You see a problem, you go fix it. But for me, I'm a junior senator. I don't have seniority over here. So what I have to do is, if we're going to get something accomplished, you have to build a coalition to do that. What's interesting about our delegation is we all punch way above our weight. We all have separate issues. We trust each other. We allow that individual to take the leading position on that. And I don't care if it's from Tom on approps or Frank on ag issues, James being with financial services or budget, or you have Stephanie that we have the ability to work together now on armed services and on approps too, and then you have Kevin and you have Josh, who they're all leading in different aspects in the House. What we have to do is build a coalition, because what I learned when I went to the Senate real quick is that both chambers worry about the other chamber. And most of the time when I'm arguing with my wife, it's a misunderstanding. We both want the same thing for our family, and we both love each other, but there's a misunderstanding. So it's a breakdown of communication. what the role that I play between the White House, between the Senate, and between the House is breaking down that miscommunication and just bringing the facts to the table. Instead of worrying about what someone's doing to do, build a coalition to figure out how we can accomplish what our common goal is and deliver for the American people. And that's simply having a conversation and putting the right people on the telephone, putting the right people in the room, and having a clear vision on what we're trying to accomplish. And fortunately, because I served so long in the House and I had that relationship and been able to maintain the relationship and been able to build a relationship in the Senate, and then obviously have an outstanding relationship with the president, who I call a friend. We find ourselves in a really good opportunity to make some real big differences for the country right now. And I think we can all say this: we feel privileged to be here right now.
Can I add something to that? Because I think it's really important. The other thing that I think is really great about this delegation is that we all have the ability to call each other and say, hey, what's happening? I mean, I did that on Sunday afternoon on the
Yeah, but you never answer when I call you.
That's not.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Everybody here, the hardest person to get hold of, we'll all agree, is Tom.
Yep.
Yes, he's the hardest person to get hold of. But we all get hold of each other and we all talk.
There's been so many times where I've called one of the senators to say, hey, can you tell me what's happening here? Or what are you hearing on your side? Here's what's happening on our side. And I think we're really privileged that we're a small enough delegation that we have really close relationships with each other.
Yes.
And have the ability to pick up the phone and say, hey, Josh, what's happening here? Or Senate, what's happening on the Senate side? And you all are really, I think, wonderful at the collaboration.
What's unique about that, though, is our delegation hasn't always got along great. We've got along, but not great. I would say we get along great right now.
Then that helps our state.
Yes,
And that's not true. That's not true, not just for Oklahoma delegation historically years ago, but it's not true for a lot of other delegations
That's right.
around the country.
Congressman Brecheen, you are the newest, also the youngest member of
Yeah, don't forget about it.
Are you the youngest?
I look like the youngest, right?
100%. How old are you?
45.
Really? Man, you have aged awful.
Where have you found opportunities to lead? What's your kind of mindset in terms of how can I be a leader?
I want to pay respect to Wes Watkins. We've lost him. I often remember him. He would quote one of the lines out of the FFA Creed, faith specific to deeds, not words, at the beginning of that creed. And as somebody who went through the program, and I think that is so important that we be about deeds and just not words. Politics is so easy to say things, and I've got something hanging on my wall that it's up there as a reminder, and it's comes from Martin Luther King Jr. and it says that cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? And it's a constant reminder for me every day. For all of us, it would feel conviction. Am I delivering on my conviction? Because all of us will have different issues, right? God intrinsically sets you up in your life, or you'll have different experiences, and then you'll be convicted over certain things. And relative to Scripture, it's not just the things that we do that we know are wrong that's sin. There's also a Scripture that says, to him who knows the right thing to do and doesn't do it, it's sin. So to me, leadership is about delivering on your conviction and your conscience. And when you're going to lead an orchestra, you have to turn your back to the crowd. And that's the danger of a Republican delegation, that we're often fighting the media that wants to use the word democracy. That's the difference between a democracy and a republic. A republic, according to Washington, he wrote a letter to John Jay to this effect, or Henry Knox, and he said, if the great power above could erect the standard of infallibility among political opinion, there's no being that would resort to it to more eagerness than myself, as long as I remain a servant of the public. But given hitherto, one of those great words of that time, but hitherto, since I found no better guide than upright intentions and close examination, I will resort to these maxims while I keep the watch. What was George Washington saying after he signed a very unpopular at the time Jay Treaty? If your conscience is clean, and you've studied the issue, and you're doing what your conscience dictates, that's leadership.
Where'd you go to high school at?
Congressman Hern?
Yeah, I spent 40 years in business today, 35 years before I got here. And, I always used to remember, as you get a new business, you want to be called CEO, you want to be a leader, and you learn very quickly that leadership is something you earn, not something you get. It's not a title you get to have. And I jokingly have told this to so many people, including the speaker, that after about 3 years having a bunch of restaurants and a bunch of businesses, I changed my nameplate to Head Excuse Eliminator, because what you find is so many things are not done because of some reason. And if you have a solution and a path forward, your retort to that person that says they can't do it. So if I remove that barrier, then you could vote for it in the case up here. You would be surprised how many times that actually works. But also leadership's about credibility. I've been asked a lot about, is it important to be liked as a leader? And I said, well, if you look on the top 10 things of being liked, it's like number 20. You have to have credibility. You have to be respected, be trusted, give good advice, sound advice, and be honest in what you do. So many times up here, people get a leadership title and they think that they own you and they're going to tell you what to do. And when you have, 535 CEOs of their own respective areas, it's very difficult. Everybody's an A personality. So you have to nurture. And probably one of the greatest statements that's ever been told to me since I've been in Congress was I was here about 6 months, pretty frustrated, in the minority. And our colleague Tom Cole said to me, he goes, as a member of Congress, what you will find out is that you want the other 434 members of districts to look just like yours. And that's exactly what happens up here. And so your real job is to build alliances and allegiances, like Senator Mullin said, about how you get people to do that. And what you find is very similar to business. It's very easy to try to run a business with an iron fist. It doesn't work very long. You have to have people that want to follow you. And that comes with trust and with, people believing that you're in for their best interests. And that's the way the leadership of the House and the Senate is. You have to have people leading those organizations that don't necessarily fit the bill of being traditional leaders, but they have to be able to take a blow and be able to come back and take that with a soft hand and move forward, as we see time and time again in our conferences, I'm sure on both ends of the Capitol.
Do you all like each other?
No.
Yes.
Most of the time.
Are there times when you think, I just want to strangle him, or I just want to, what were they thinking? I mean, I assume that, you guys are not clones. You have differences of opinion. There are times when you disagree. How does that, do you ever talk to each other about those differences?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
I think that comes with maturity. If you'd have seen the 30-year-old version of me, I was really prone to probably judge a whole lot harsher. And
You judge me every day in the gym.
vice versa. But to look at the good in people, to really value, and people, you learn that the more that you will give each other grace, that comes back to you in grace. And then you have the ability to influence that person. And so it's a personal challenge for all of us, not just here in this room, but people that back home that might say something so unkind, right? It's a maturity place to go, I love you. I may disagree with you, but I'm going to choose to love you.
I think there's a deep amount of respect, because I think for the most part, we're always trying to come from it from the right spot. And so I tell the people, we all make decisions based on two things, our life experiences and the way we're raised. And when you have that much respect that we do have for our delegation, then when there's that problem, you have no problem with picking up the phone and calling them. And as I said before, a lot of times it's a misunderstanding of understanding where you're coming from. And so we do get along, but when there's differences, it's like a family. We always can talk it through and get on the same page, because we're at the end of the day, all of us will agree we're trying to deliver for Oklahoma. And it doesn't make any difference, because there isn't a single vote that I make or that James makes that doesn't affect any of their districts. And there's not one single time that Stephanie gets a vote for something that only affects her district, or Kevin gets a vote that only affects his district. It doesn't work. We're all, I don't care what we're doing, we're all representing Oklahoma, every single vote.
But I will tell you that, I will add to that, there have been, I think, a situation or two where we've been on opposite sides of something. And I think that, to Josh's point about the maturity aspect of that, early on, I think there were some concerns about, well, is there going to be conflict? Because, certain districts are much more Republican than, for example, mine. I think that awareness that we all do represent Oklahoma, but our districts are very different. And so sometimes Josh and I may be on opposite sides of issues, but we have a mutual respect that, look, he has to vote differently. That's what his people expect from him. And I think he would feel the same way about the votes that I take too. Yeah, so right. That understanding, I think, is really, really important. It's said many times over, the members of Congress are reflective of their districts. And I think that is so incredibly true.
I think to your point about do we all like each other? I mean, it's you don't even like your family sometimes, right? I mean, but you respect who they are. And we all have jobs to do. And we don't always have all the information that led to that decision. And I think, we saw this this morning in our conference, all of us, where people say stuff out of anger as opposed to respecting the leader's position and not having all the information. It makes you want to scratch your head. I mean, I'm not saying people are taking this place way too serious, but they're not understanding how this place is supposed to move forward. And you have people here, good people, good members that lose sight of that. And they let the politics of the moment overtake the good policy and understanding the moment. And it's very frustrating. Again, the five of us saw it this morning play out in real time, probably to the degree that we haven't seen in a couple of years.
Congressman Lucas, what's your kind of guiding principle in approaching this job?
You've seen the picture from 1937 on my wall in my office. My part of Oklahoma was the armpit of the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl of the 1930s. I came here with a personal mission to make sure that while I couldn't do everything for everybody, to make sure that the federal government does not create the kind of circumstances that lead to that kind of long-term misery ever again. Do no harm. Do not hurt my constituents. That's my first and foremost issue. And whether it's conservation or ag policy or banking things or science issues, then how can I help? It's two-faced. But first, do no harm. Second, help everyone back home.
Congressman Cole.
Probably because I'm in appropriations. Number one, I don't want to shut down the federal government. I don't think that ever, does any good for anybody. And frankly, we're a pretty federal-heavy state. I'm a very federal-heavy district. So you shut down the government, you start putting people out of work, and you start, frankly, undermining businesses that perform important functions, even though they're private businesses for us. A lot of defense contractors in my district and in all of Oklahoma. And second, I would actually agree with Frank. I think we all try and put the communities, the constituents that we represent first. We try to think of their long-term good. And that means some tough decisions in terms of dealing with the debt, in terms of, sometimes having to say some things that people would prefer not to hear, but are important. But also to make sure that Oklahoma isn't overlooked. I mean, we're not California, we're not Texas, we're not New York, we're not Florida. We don't have the sheer numbers in the House. Fortunately, in the Senate, we're just as big as California and New York and those other places. But I know we all talk amongst ourselves, particularly in the House. How do we spread ourselves out among the multitude of communities? How can we put people in the right place? And I think we're uniquely blessed right now. I mean, we've got... you look at the big issues in front of us, and for government, I would say the number one thing is taxing. The last time we dealt with taxes in 2017 and the scope we are this time, we didn't have anybody on Senate Finance. Now we've got Jim Lankford, and we didn't have anybody on Ways and Means. Now we got Kevin Hern. So we're in pretty good shape compared to where we've been. And then spending's part of it too. We've got 3 appropriators as well. We only had 1 last time. I'm fortunate enough to chair Probes. Stephanie's the vice chair of one of our most important committees. Obviously, Markwayne has arrived. And guess what other things we're going to be dealing with, like the Ag Bill? Well, we've got rural Oklahoma right here between, former chairman of the Ag Committee and probably the most rural part of our state's eastern Oklahoma. So we've got some really well-positioned people that have worked hard to get to where they're at. And I think work together extraordinarily as a team. Kevin was making the point earlier about sometimes hard things get said. I don't recall any of us saying hard things about one another. And I've never seen any of us undercut the others. And we recognize even a delegation is small. There'll be differences of opinion. That's okay. Because we all have, the 5 of us have about 750, 800,000 bosses at home. poor Markwayne and James have 4 million bosses at home. So I think this delegation does a really good job of representing the people at home, and particularly their immediate constituents.
This is something that already has been touched on some before you got here, but I want to dive into this just a little bit more if anyone has more to say about it. And I've heard you all say at one time or another that this delegation, the Oklahoma delegation, has in the past punched above its weight and does today. So is there something, particular about Oklahoma that makes that happen? In your opinion, why is that? Why is that the case? And to open up to anyone.
Well, these guys are the senior body, but I think being in the middle part of the country, as Senator Lankford said, our conservative cred has been validated multiple times now with Republican presidential elections. President Trump loves to talk about Oklahoma voted for him 3 times, all 77 counties. I think when we talk about conservative values, that puts us in a great spot to continue to talk about that, promote that. And I think America is always right of center. Regardless of who you are, you don't want the federal government in your face every single day. And we are about that. We're about limited government. And the only way you can truly have limited government is you have to follow the money. You have to get your spending in order, which is what we're all working on right now as a Republican Party. It's messy. It's ugly. It's been allowed to leak and go awry for a number of years now. And we're seeing a lot of things happen, and it's uncomfortable. But we're going to work through this. We're going to get it done.
Go ahead, James.
No, I was just thinking the shoulders that we all stand on. I think that's part of it. I mean, our group works really hard, and we work really hard on the relationships. And when we have problems, we go talk to each other and we work it out, because we know we've got to represent 4 million people and to be able to keep going. But we also understand the shoulders that we stand on. I mean, if I look at just my Senate seat, it's Tom Coburn, it's Don Nichols, it's Henry Bellman, and you keep going back, Robert S. Kerr, and you look at all the background that you've got behind you of some folks that worked really hard and made a real difference for our state. So they set a path that you get here and you think, okay, do the next level and don't mess it up. And so you keep the work going. And so I think the examples that have been set before us do make a difference for each of us. And we also feel the obligation. 4 million people are counting on us to be able to get the work done. And whoever has this seat next, we want to set the tone and make sure it's ready for them next.
When I first came,
Go ahead.
sorry,
No,
Senator.
Big Papa.
There was an unwritten rule when I first came. We spread out. Being a small state, and that day we had 6 House members, 2 senators, we spread out to maximize our influence. Now, the one exception is something that we came to realize over the last 25 years, and that is we could never be without an appropriator again. So while we have a chairman, we got somebody in the bullpen on the House side ready to throw the ball, but we've traditionally spread out. And that's maximized our influence as a small state.
And that was exactly what I was going to say. We all have different areas. When I referred to this earlier, we have different areas that we trust each other on and expertise. And the only place we overlap is approps. Because the only reason why I'm on approps in the Senate is because Tom was the chair of approps in the House. Because I feel like we can get so much more done for the state if we have an appropriator on both sides of the chamber. And just like Stephanie, as Frank said, is in the bullpen, because as Tom's chairmanship comes to the end, we got to have somebody else that's going to be able to get there. But every one of us, we are on different committees doing different things that represent the interests of Oklahoma, because we can't all do it all, but because we communicate with each other, literally we talk about what committee you need to be on.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, if I'm mistaken, correct me, but I don't think any of us are on T&I. On the policy side, on the authorizing side, but now I'm on the appropriation side of T&I. And so, to your point, we all have these important roles that we play to make sure that we're covering important issue areas that are crucial to make sure Oklahoma is successful.
I also think, though, that collectively we represent the really pretty proud heritage of a state that's still really a frontier state. And if you're out on the frontier, everybody works together or nobody survives. And you see this in things like the Oklahoma City bombing, and you see it, there's some hard parts of our history, tribal relations, the race riot in Tulsa in 1921. I think we've learned, hey, we're better together. And I think this delegation, whether it's this particular one of the moment or over the years, has recognized that. Years ago, I remember Mickey Edwards, who I worked for at the time, and he was the only Republican in the House delegation, talking about how he could work with Wes Watkins, or how he could work with Glenn English, or how they found things in common, because they were in different parties, but they weren't all that different philosophically. And they never, they knew no part of the state would benefit if some other part of the state was not doing well in addition. So again, we, obviously each of us that are in the House look at our districts, and obviously Markwayne and James look at the whole state. But we recognize, hey, if I can help somebody in another part of Oklahoma that's not part I represent, I'm going to do that. We try to work together back and forth, and I think we do that better than certainly states the size of California or something, where I actually think there's a lot more regional rivalries inside other states than there is within our state.
I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I'm going to finish. I've stayed away from topical issues, but I'm just going to throw out a few things here at the end if you guys want to address any or all of them.
It's time to go.
And yes, I'm still trying to get Congressman Brecheen raised, but I'm working hard.
So a couple of the issues, of course, that people are talking about right now, the cuts that might have to be made for reconciliation to be a reality. President Trump's tariff strategy and DOGE. Obviously there are Democrats in your districts. There are some Republicans in your districts who are nervous about the impacts that some of these things may have on their lives, their pocketbooks. They wonder how you are looking out for them. So
Can I speak to the tax policy?
Please.
So first of all, as I've said to the press, for the press to say that President Trump is giving tax cuts to the rich is just not true. What he's trying to do is make the current tax policy permanent. Who he's giving tax cuts to are those who need it most, which are on the lower income scales. Those who are making tips, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. The folks that really need this extra help that's hard to get any other way. He's made that campaign promise time and time again. We're working hard on ways and means to make that come to fruition. He also wants to give deductibility to interest on cars made in America, so people buy American. Everything he's doing in additional tax cuts are for those who need it most, which are on the lower end, middle income and lower end of the income scales. So for anybody to say that he's giving an additional tax cut to the rich, that is just absolute lie.
Well, I'd say two things. Number one, if anybody in Oklahoma became head of a business that was losing $2 trillion a year, the first thing they'd say is, let's stop the hiring. Let's take a look at every single job and every single mission, because we know we can't sustain that kind of loss over time. So yeah, there are some tough decisions up front, but the best protection Oklahoma has in that process is that the missions we have are so critical, and frankly, our workforces are so good. I was visiting with the commander of Tinker Air Force Base recently, and there were all these rumors we were going to lose hundreds of jobs. They've lost one job at Tinker, one. And we've lost almost no federal employees to state. That's not because we're a great delegation, although I think we are, but it's mostly because those workers are really good workers, and those missions are vital, whether it's groundwater research at Kerr Water Labs in Ada, whether it's keeping 50 and 60-year-old airplanes flying in combat conditions, which they do at Tinker Air Force Base, whether it's we've got to look down the road, God forbid we're in another war, but we better be able to knock down drones, and we better have long-range precision artillery. Those people are doing really important things. And so because of that's why we've never lost a military facility in a BRAC round. Not just because the delegation was good, it was, but because the missions were good and the performance of Oklahomans in their jobs was exceptional. You got a third of the munitions of the United States Army sitting in Josh's district. But that's a pretty important place at McAllister. They do pretty important things. So again, why are we going to move a third of the munitions in the United States Army from where they're being looked after and new stuff is being developed? It just we're lucky in the facilities that our forebearers or forerunners, as this delegation, brought to Oklahoma, because they brought critical missions, and honestly, Oklahomans stepped up and performed very, very well at discharging those missions.
Yeah, when I talk to most Oklahomans, they don't disagree we need to be able to reduce spending. They just don't. I mean, even folks that come up to me immediately and say, I'm mad about whatever it may be, we all just listen and try to be able to figure out what's behind it. And as we listen longer, most of the time it's, I know there's $2 trillion in debt. I know we've got problems. I know it's inefficient. I want that to get better. But then they think, I just don't like the particular way it's being done often. I say to my staff all the time, there's a right thing to do and a right way to do it. And I'll have folks say, I just don't like the particular way something's being done. But at the end of the day, when I say, hey, we're $2 trillion in overspending, that's been several years in a row. We're really running downhill in a hurry with our debt. We've got to get on it. Most of the folks will look back and go, you're right. We got to figure this out. And everybody kind of knows there's going to be a hard moment to be able to resolve hard things. But always the hope is that some future date, it's here. And quite frankly, for all of us that have been here for a while, we've all been ringing that bell. All 7 of us have been ringing this bell for years to say we have got to get on top of our deficit spending. We've got to get on top of that. We've got to be more efficient. We release all these different reports we go through in committee hearings. We're finally getting traction to be able to do a lot of the things that we've all talked about doing for a long time. But we just got to be able to make sure we're respecting people in the process on it, because every time you talk about efficiency in a person, whether it's one person or whether it's thousands, that's a family. And we all get that. And we have compassion for that. But we also all understand we've got to do some hard things as a nation. That's why we're elected, is to do hard things. So we've got to do some hard things.
And I would just concur with that. It's not what's being done, it's how it's being done. And I think most of us would agree, we don't love every aspect of how it's being done. You know, we would like it to be maybe done a little differently if we had our way, if we were elected president, but we're not. We're trusting that President Trump will, look at the lay of the land and figure out what's the best path forward. People have said, I would rather use a scalpel to try to right-size government than this hammer approach. But frankly, we've been trying the scalpel for a very long time, and it hasn't been effective. And so President Trump has decided to use a uncomfortable and very unconventional way to try to address this issue. Will it work? I think that still remains to be seen. We're willing to give deference and grace to figure out, is this the path forward? And if not, I think you'll see us, try to figure out what's plan B. But I think that people, to Senator Lankford's point, recognize we have to do something and we've got to do it now.
When you start talking about tariffs, we all have been complaining about tariffs for a long time and the unfair trade policies we have with countries taking advantage of us. And we see jobs leaving our districts. We see jobs leaving our states. They're making the product that was made here is now made in another country, but yet it's still being sold back here because of the trade issues we have. President Trump has finally got the backbone to do it. No other president has done that. And I get that some people like to complain about stuff, but I have a saying, you're never going to change anything you're willing to tolerate. We've tolerated it so long. We've known it was wrong. We know we had to do something, and finally we're doing it. It is uncomfortable. But at what point was we going to fix it? At what point was it going to come to a head where it's going to force us to fix it? There's countries that have got extremely wealthy by taking trillions of dollars outside of the United States economy just to turn it back around to sell it to us. And I don't know if I would do it any different if I was the president or not. I'm not the president. There's not other options, but Stephanie is absolutely correct. A scalpel approach isn't. What?
Say it again.
Stephanie's correct by saying that a scalpel doesn't work. Nor can you simply take tariffs one country at a time, because what happens is, let's say we put tariffs on China like we have before. Then they start using Cambodia and Vietnam to go around us, and they start dumping products and they start coming into here. You start talking about our wheat growers. Every wheat grower you talk to will tell about the story of shipments going to China, and on a boat over there, they cancel it. And they say, well, we don't want it anymore. Well, you think, well, you already ordered it, you got to pay it. It's China. They're not going to pay it. But they'll call you back 3 days later and say, hey, we'll tell you what, we'll take it off your hands for this price. Or Vietnam or Cambodia will call you and say, hey, I heard you got a shipment that's out in the Pacific. Why don't you send it to us and we'll take it for this price? And it never changes direction. It just keeps going on to China. People's been taking advantage of us way too long. And President Trump is finally fixing it. It's uncomfortable, but we had to right the ship at some point. This is the time to do it. So let's get it done.
Folks, I really appreciate your time.
I'm grateful to the members for being willing to participate in this group interview, but especially grateful to their respective communications directors, press secretaries, and schedulers who did the heavy lifting and defied the odds in finding a time in the middle of appropriations season when all of their bosses could be in the same place for 30 minutes. It was truly a rare occasion. For our Washington Bureau, I'm Oklahoma's own Alex Cameron.